What if I told you that the moments when you feel most uncertain, most unmoored from the strategies and systems that once held your life together, are not moments of failure, but of preparation? That the strange quiet you sometimes feel when your old methods stop working is not emptiness, but a clearing? Most people move through their lives believing that control is the answer, that if they could just plan better, think harder, grip tighter, everything would fall into place. And yet, there are these other moments, small and easy to dismiss, when something else emerges. A knowing that arrives without thought, a direction that presents itself without effort, a sense of rightness that has nothing to do with logic. These moments are not accidents. They are not the result of wishful thinking or coincidence. They are the voice of something deeper, something that has been waiting beneath the surface of your awareness, patient and unhurried, for the day when you would finally stop shouting long enough to hear it. You might remember a time when you were standing in your kitchen, perhaps early in the morning before anyone else was awake, holding a cup of tea or coffee, and you felt it. A softness in your chest, a loosening, not dramatic, not revelatory in the way we expect transformation to be, but quiet. You've been trying so hard to figure something out, to force a decision, to make the pieces fit, and then, in that moment, you simply stopped. Not because you gave up, but because something in you recognized that the effort itself had become the obstacle. And in that pause, in that brief suspension of your usual strategies, something else stepped forward. A sense, a direction, a whisper that said, not with words but with feeling, this way. Most of us are taught to distrust that voice. We are told that the rational mind, the planning mind, the mind that categorizes and predicts and controls, is the only reliable guide. And so when intuition speaks, we second guess it. We ask for proof. We demand that it justify itself in the language of logic. But intuition does not speak that language. It speaks in images, in sensations, in a quiet certainty that cannot be explained but can be felt. And the more we insist that it prove itself before we listen, the quieter it becomes, until eventually we forget it was ever there at all. But it is always there, waiting. In the moments when our control begins to soften, when the structures we have built around ourselves start to loosen, are the moments when intuition can finally be heard. Not because it suddenly appears, but because we finally stop drowning it out. Carl Jung spent much of his life exploring the terrain between the conscious and unconscious mind, mapping the territories where the ego ends and something larger begins. He understood that the persona we present to the world, the carefully constructed self that knows how to behave and what to say and how to succeed, is only a small part of who we are. Beneath it lies the unconscious, vast and rich and alive with symbols, patterns, and truths that the conscious mind cannot access through effort alone. Jung called this deeper intelligence the self. And he believed that the journey toward wholeness, toward what he called individuation, required not more control, but a willingness to listen, to attend, to allow the unconscious to speak. He also spoke of synchronicity, those moments when the outer world seems to mirror an inner process, when a chance encounter or a random event carries a meaning that cannot be explained by cause and effect alone. These are not magical occurrences, Jung suggested, but evidence of a deeper order, a pattern that connects the inner and outer worlds in ways that the rational mind cannot fully grasp. When we begin to notice these patterns, when we start to see that our lives are not random, but woven through with threads of meaning, we are not imagining things. We are beginning to see what has always been there. And so, in this exploration, I want to share with you a series of signs, inner shifts that indicate something profound is happening within you. These are not steps to follow or techniques to master. They are recognitions, moments of awareness that suggest your relationship with control is changing, and that intuition, that quiet inner knowing, is beginning to step forward. If you stay with me, If you allow yourself to move slowly through these reflections, you may find that recent experiences, moments that felt confusing or disorienting, begin to make sense in a new way. You may realize that what you thought was loss was actually preparation, that what felt like failure was actually an invitation. There is a shift that happens, often so gradually that you do not notice it until you look back, when a voice in your head that is always planning, always strategizing, always trying to figure out the next move, begins to quiet. Not because you have solved all your problems, but because you have grown tired of the noise. You have spent so much energy trying to think your way through life, believing that if you could just analyze the situation correctly, anticipate every outcome, prepare for every contingency, you would finally feel safe. But the safety never comes. The more you plan, the more there is to plan for. The more you try to control, the more you realize how little is actually within your control. And then, one day, you find yourself sitting in a moment of uncertainty, a moment where you do not know what to do next. And instead of immediately reaching for a strategy, you pause. You breathe. You notice the tightness in your shoulders, the way your jaw has been clenched without you realizing it, the exhaustion that lives just beneath the surface of all that effort. And in that pause, something shifts. Not a solution, not an answer, just a shift, a softening, a recognition that maybe, just maybe, you do not have to figure everything out right now. This is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is something else entirely. It is the beginning of trust, not in a plan or a strategy, but in a process that unfolds in its own time, guided by something deeper than thought. You might not have words for it yet. You might not even be sure it is real, but you feel it, a quiet presence, a sense that you are not alone in this, that there is something within you that knows the way, even when your conscious mind is not. Jung would say that this is the self beginning to speak, the deeper intelligence that has always been guiding you, even when you were too busy controlling to notice. The ego, with all its plans and fears and strategies, is necessary. It helps us navigate the world, but it is not the whole of who we are. And when we live only from the ego, only from the part of us that thinks it must manage everything, we cut ourselves off from the deeper currents of life, the patterns and meanings and connections that cannot be forced but only received. You may have noticed in recent months or years that the things you use to rely on to make decisions no longer feel reliable. The pros and cons lists, the advice from others, the logical arguments you construct in your mind, they still have their place, but they no longer feel sufficient. You go through the motions of rational decision-making, and yet something in you remains unsatisfied. overthinking. You are being irrational. You should give it a chance. And so you ignore the quiet voice and you move forward. And later, sometimes much later, you realize that the quiet voice had been right all along. Not because it had access to information you did not have, but because it was reading the situation in a different way, perceiving patterns and connections that the conscious mind, focused on its own narratives and assumptions, could not see. This is one of the great challenges of learning to trust intuition. It requires a kind of humility, a willingness to admit that the conscious mind, for all its brilliance, is not the only source of knowing. It requires us to let go of the belief that we must understand something before we can trust it, that we must be able to explain and justify every decision. Intuition does not offer explanations. It offers direction, and learning to follow it is an act of faith, not in something external, but in the deeper intelligence that lives within us. Jung understood that the unconscious communicates through symbols, through images and dreams and patterns that cannot be reduced to literal meaning. When we try to interpret these symbols with a rational mind, we often miss the point. The unconscious is not trying to give us information in the way a textbook does. It is trying to shift something in us, to open us to a new way of seeing, to guide us toward a truth that cannot be spoken but only experienced. And so, as you begin to notice these moments of intuitive knowing, it is important not to demand that they make sense immediately. It is important to let them be what they are, to hold them lightly, to see where they lead without needing to understand every step of the way. This is a different kind of relationship with life, one that is less about control and more about participation, less about forcing outcomes and more about allowing a process to unfold. You may also notice that your body has become a source of information in a way it was not before. You feel things in your chest, in your stomach, in your throat. A tightness when something is wrong. A warmth when something is right. A heaviness when you are moving against yourself. A lightness when you are aligned. These sensations are not random. They are not just stress or anxiety or indigestion. They are messages, signals from the deeper self, trying to guide you. Western culture has taught us to live in our heads, to trust thought over feeling, reason over sensation. And so we have learned to ignore the body, to override its signals, to push through discomfort in service of what we think we should do. But the body does not lie. It does not have an agenda. It simply responds to what is true. And when we learn to listen to it, when we learn to recognize its language, it becomes one of our most reliable guides. You might remember a time when you were in a conversation and everything the other person was saying sounded reasonable, sounded right, but your body was saying no. Your stomach was tight. Your breath was shallow. Your shoulders were creeping up toward your ears. And you try to talk yourself out of it. You told yourself you were being paranoid, overly sensitive, irrational. But later, when the truth came out, when the situation revealed itself, you realized that your body had known all along. This is intuition speaking through the body. And as you begin to soften your grip on control, as you begin to trust that there is a deeper intelligence at work, you will find yourself paying more attention to these signals. You will pause when your chest tightens. You will reconsider when your stomach drops. You will honor the wisdom of your body, not as a replacement for thought, but as a companion to it, a different kind of knowing that sees what the mind cannot. There's also a shift in how you experience time. When you are living from control, from the constant effort to manage and predict and plan, time feels linear and urgent. There's always something that needs to be done, always a deadline, always a next step. The present moment is just a brief pause between the past you're trying to make sense of and the future you're trying to secure. But as control softens, as you begin to trust the process, time begins to feel different. It expands. It deepens. The present moment becomes not just a pause, but a place to dwell, a space where life is actually happening. You find yourself less preoccupied with what comes next. You are still aware of the future, still making plans, but there is less urgency, less anxiety. You are more able to be here, now, in this moment, with whatever is arising. And in this presence, intuition has room to speak. Because intuition does not live in the future or the past. It lives in the now, in the immediate felt sense of what is true in this moment. Jung spoke of the importance of being present to the unconscious, of creating space for it to emerge. He understood that the unconscious cannot be forced or summoned on demand. It reveals itself in its own time, in its own way, and our task is not to control it, but to attend to it, to notice when it is speaking and to honor what it has to say. This requires a slowing down, a willingness to move at a different pace, to let go of the constant forward momentum that characterizes so much of modern life. You may find that you're drawn to practices that cultivate this kind of presence. Meditation, walking in nature, sitting in silence, journaling. These are not techniques to master or goals to achieve. They are simply ways of creating space, of softening the grip of the controlling mind, of allowing the deeper self to be heard. And as you engage in these practices, not with the goal of becoming better or more enlightened, but simply as a way of being with yourself, you may notice that intuition begins to speak more clearly, more frequently, more insistently. There is also a shift in how you relate to uncertainty. When you are living from control, uncertainty is the enemy. It is what you are trying to eliminate, to manage, to prepare for. But as control softens, uncertainty begins to feel different. Not comfortable, necessarily, but less threatening. You begin to see it not as a problem to be solved, but as a space of possibility, a place where something new can emerge. You are standing at a crossroads, and you do not know which way to go. In the past, this would have sent you into a frenzy of research, analysis, consultation. You would have tried to gather enough information to make the uncertainty go away, to find the right answer. But now you find yourself simply standing there, breathing, waiting, not passively, not helplessly, but with a kind of active receptivity. You are listening. You are paying attention. You are trusting that the way will reveal itself when the time is right. This is not easy. Every part of your conditioning is screaming at you to do something, to take action, to make a decision. But you have learned, perhaps through painful experience, each moment of listening, each act of trust, was part of a larger unfolding. You will see that nothing was random, that everything was leading you here, to this moment, to this version of yourself that is more whole, more alive, more real than you have ever been. This is the promise of the journey. This is what awaits you when you soften your grip on control and allow intuition to step forward. Not certainty, not ease, not a life free of challenges or pain, but a life that is truly yours. A life that is aligned with the deepest truth of who you are. A life that is meaningful, not because you forced it to be, but because you allowed it to unfold in its own way, in its own time, guided by the quiet wisdom that has been with you all along. So take a moment now. Sit with what you have heard. Notice what resonates. Notice what stirs in you. And if you feel moved to, write something down. Not a plan, not a strategy, just a reflection, a question, a recognition, something that helps you remember this moment, this invitation, this possibility. And if this exploration has touched something in you, if it has helped you see your own experience in a new light, I invite you to like this video, to subscribe, to share your thoughts in the comments. Not because I need you to, but because these small acts of engagement help this work reach others who may need to hear it, who may be standing at the same threshold you are, wondering if it is safe to let go, wondering if there is something deeper they can trust. You are not alone in this. You are part of a larger movement, a collective awakening, a return to a way of being that is more human, more connected, more whole. And every time you choose to listen to intuition, every time you soften your grip on control, you are contributing to this movement. You are helping to shift the collective consciousness towards something more aligned, more true. So go gently. Be patient with yourself. Trust the process. And know that the quiet voice within you is not leading you astray. It is leading you home.